starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to our guide to the Restricted Access Vehicle Route Assessment Tool webinar. And my name is Rosie Patterson and I am moderating the session. We've planned to go for 60 minutes with time for questions, but we'll also make the recording available for anyone who wants to leave early or review the webinar later. We have the usual webinar functions for our audience to use, and we love interaction and questions, so please type in your input. And we have a very large audience today, so a great interest, which we love. And if we don't get to answer all the questions, we'll answer by email later. So our presenter today is Kieran Hay. Welcome, Kieran.
Hi, Rosie. How's it going?
Awesome. Great to have you. And I'm in Melbourne. Where are you?
So I'm in the Brisbane office today.
Good. You found a quiet spot. That's great. Sounding good. And I'll have to tell our audience about your vast experience before we get started. So you are a senior professional engineer in the Future Transport Technology Group at ARRB. And since starting at ARRB in 2017, you've worked primarily on transport safety, heavy vehicle safety, road design, and connected automated vehicles. And prior to joining ARRB, you worked for the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator, assisting in the delivery of national heavy vehicle notices. So that's a great lot of experience there, and thank you so much for the webinar today. So let's get started.
Yep, no worries. So I'll just jump into a little bit of background information just to give a bit of background on what RAV RAT is and why it's needed, I suppose. So first of all, I just want to thank everyone for attending. It's been a great turnout. Like I said, I'll just start with some background info. So essentially, the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator governs heavy vehicle access through the Heavy Vehicle National Law. And this basically just means that all regulation vehicles, such as rigid trucks and semi-trailers, have access to all roads under general access. Then there's also restricted access vehicles, which require specific authority or exemptions to access road networks. And road manager's consent is required to provide access to restricted access vehicles under the HVNL. And that's done through two mechanisms of access, which is notices and permits. So essentially, the freight demand is ever increasing in our lifestyles, and the main driver for this is high demand of freight. In order to meet this demand with our current vehicles and infrastructure, efficiency gains must be achieved. So this is shown in this diagram, where to meet the freight demand in the red circle, our aim is to move towards efficient freight movement in the green circle. In order to do this, we must match up the vehicles with the infrastructure. So vehicles can be assessed against established and recognized standards and sets the measure for acceptable performance. A similar process is followed when assessing the capability of our infrastructure and network. Ultimately, both vehicles and infrastructure can be given a classification. And when this is optimized and the right vehicles are matched with the right roads, access can be granted in an efficient and safe way to kind of get those efficiency gains. So I guess, how do we classify a vehicle's level of access? So with RAV RAT, we use the PBS Classification scheme. So that gives you levels 1 through 4. So this table here is derived from TMR's multi-combination heavy vehicle route assessment guidelines and provides that link between the PBS classification levels for network access and typical heavy vehicles that you would see on the road already. So as an example, a typical B-double, so your typical 26-meter B-double, has the same road access as PBS level 2A. And you can see a couple of other examples there on that table. So this graph is pretty much a graphic representation of the assessed vehicle performance against the assessed road capability. So essentially, it shows that when low assessed capability on a road, low assessed capability on a road can only support vehicles with a high assessed performance. while high assessed road capability can handle vehicles with lower assessed performance. So an example of this is, as you can see on the graph, we've got some of the larger, heavier vehicles which have a lower assessed performance on roads that have a higher assessed capability. So I guess, what does this all mean for granting access to roads? So all of this means that when determining access for new heavy vehicle types on existing infrastructure, a route assessment may be required as part of the consent process. So a route assessment typically involves assessing likely infrastructure impacts, assessing bridges, culverts, pavements, and a geometric assessment of the road. And I guess that all leads us to what is RAV RAT. So RAV RAT is the Restricted Access Vehicle Route Assessment Tool. And it's an online tool that was developed by ARRB to essentially assist local governments when acting as road managers under the HVNL. It allows the assessment of routes for all restricted access vehicles. And it's based on the PBS Network Classification Guidelines for local governments, which was developed by ARRB back in 2012. And certain parts of it are based on oversize over mass guidelines that were developed by ARRB in conjunction with Transport for New South Wales. I just want to take a quick moment to basically just thank NHVR and also all of the local government associations for their continued support in the development of RAV RAT. They've been a huge help with, getting RAV RAT out there to all the councils and providing funding to, keep us up and running. So I just really want to thank them. All right, so where does RAV RAT fit? So essentially we take the NTC's classification guidelines as the gold standard for route assessment. These were mainly designed for state road authorities who typically had higher levels of resources available and higher levels of data to facilitate a more detailed route assessment. These capabilities may not always be available to local governments. Thus, not many people were really using it previously. From this, the local government classification guidelines were developed specifically to assist local government. RAV RAT was then built using these guidelines as the basis for its route assessment, and any departure from that gold standard is basically measured and captured within a reliability index within the tool. So everything is measured and everything is very accurate, and it essentially just makes the tool very usable for pretty much anyone. So I guess I'm saying, why should you use RAV RAT? So RAV RAT essentially provides you with a simple question and answer process for the route assessment, making it incredibly easy to use, as I said previously. It provides a consistent, reliable, and traceable workflow for assessment. So, for instance, if you provide a route assessment back to NHVR and they ask questions about it, you can easily track back to how you came up with that answer. This assessment process also establishes what I like to call a defensible position for any of your responses to access requests, and it satisfies the HVNL statement of reason requirements. So for instance, if you refused a route and you were then questioned as to why you refused it, you could then provide them very easily why you, I suppose, refused that and what criteria it didn't meet. The tool also builds on past assessments to provide faster processing in the future. So it reuses elements of the route to essentially make any other route that uses those quicker to assess. So obviously this is an online tool and privacy and security is, a pretty big thing these days. The system is designed to support local road managers' decisions. Therefore, any route information that is put into the tool is only shared within that local council. All information is private and secure, We do some reporting on that data. However, it's strictly for support and research purposes only, and all the data is anonymous and aggregated. Only the results of completed routes that you choose to, I suppose, publish externally to state road authorities would be made public, would be made available to authorities, and that's only if you want to. No details or comments or inner workings essentially are released to anyone externally. So RAV RAT is basically made up of 3 different assessment modules. So you've got local considerations, which essentially handles all non-engineering related considerations. The PBS Expert, which essentially assesses restricted access vehicles based on those PBS guidelines. And we've got a very broad over the size, over mass expert, which assesses against the developed framework that we came up with. And essentially the plan for RAV RAT is to eventually integrate this further into the NHVR Road Manager portal to basically make it as accessible as possible to local governments and to have all that information in one place. So I'll open this up quickly for any questions about what I've gone over since the start, just before we go into the actual more training side of this presentation.
Thank you. Yes, we have got a question which is about where you can use it. So is it that you can only use, it can be used across Australia or only in some states?
Yep, so that's a great question. So currently, because we've partnered with NHVR to deliver this product basically free of charge to all local councils, it's only local councils that I suppose are operating under the HVNL. In saying that it's every state other than WA or NT. They can get access. So if you are from WA or NT, feel free to apply for an account, and I'll get in contact with you and discuss it and work out how we give you access and if there's any cost involved in that.
Awesome, and good question. Thank you, Guy. Another question from Mark. What about unsealed roads?
Yep. So the tool does take into consideration unsealed roads in some aspects, but in some cases, it's not as, I suppose, functional as we would like. There is some unsealed functionality that we are looking at putting into the tool. However, it hasn't come in yet. I suppose if you would like more information around that, feel free to contact me, or I can get Rosie to get your details and I'll contact you, and we can discuss that a little bit further.
Thank you, we can do that. Shirlene's asking, is every local road entered into RAV RAT, and how is the data? Is it comprehensive data? Yeah,
so with RAV RAT, it basically draws on an external mapping system. So it uses Nokia's Here Maps, which provides all of the road links and road intersections and everything like that. Now, the data that you actually use to assess the route, that comes from your council. So that's something that you actually need to enter yourself. So things like lane widths or super elevation of your road or anything like that, that's data that you need to put in yourself. There's not any central repository of that data, Australia-wide. So there's nothing that we can draw on for that. So there is a certain amount of data that you actually need to input yourself, unfortunately.
Thank you. We'll just ask one more before we move on, and thank you to all the questions. It's great. Keep them coming. Adam has asked, can people not within the councils access the tool? Yep, sorry if you just that.
That's right. So currently we're not providing access to the tool to any industry operators. We are considering doing a trial in the future to work out, I suppose, what the benefits are to provide access to industry. Right now, I'm not too sure when exactly we'll be doing that. We will end up probably releasing a media release to alert industry to whether we do that or not. In the instance of engineering consultants that are doing work on behalf of a local council, we can give access in that instance. We're still working out the process on how we do that, because we've started having more engineering consultants asking us about that. So we're currently in the process of coming up with a, I guess, process on how we deliver access to them. So we should hopefully have some information about that in the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. And we've got some great questions from Daniel, Jamie, Sam, Damien and Zahid. And we'll wait and just move on to keep moving, but we'll hopefully get back to those. Thanks, Kieran.
Yep. There'll be a couple more sections for questions as we go through the slides, and then also a question section at the end. So hopefully I can answer everyone's questions. All right. So this is moving more into the actual training side, or explanation of how to actually use RAV RAT. So this webinar, it's not going to go over every single section of RAV RAT. Unfortunately, there's probably not enough time to do that in the 1 hour slot that we have. So this webinar is only going to discuss basically how to access RAV RAT, where to find help in training, how to create a new route, how to use the PBS Expert, and then also how to view the outcomes from that assessment. So we'll just basically start at the basics and just go over how to sign up and log into RAV RAT. I know this is stuff that you probably already know, but we'll just go over it quickly. So essentially on the home page, you can sign up just using the sign up button. When you click that, it'll take you through to a sign up page, and you basically just need to enter in your details. So, name, email address, what state you're in, and also what local council you're associated with. I've had some people from industry that have been trying to get access, and because it's not coming from a government email address, it kind of gets knocked back. And that'll keep happening until we decide to do an industry trial, essentially. So once you already have an account, then you can just log in using your username and password and hit the login button. So once you've logged into RAV RAT, you're then able to access all the help and training resources. So to access that, we have the resources section on the left, and that'll kind of drop down and you'll be able to see the frequently asked questions and the support section and the training section. So we're just going to look at the training materials for now. So we just click on the training materials. That takes us through to this page here. So at the top, we've got the RAV RAT user manual, which you can download. And we've also got a whole bunch of videos there that kind of guide you on how to actually use RAV RAT. We are in the process of redoing some of these videos so it matches with the current scheme of the website. So if you click on any of the links, it'll take you through to another section which actually has all the videos, and you can start viewing those. So when you come into RAV RAT, it'll basically drop you on this page here. So this is the first page you'll see after logging in, and it shows all of your routes listed at the top, and then also shows them on the map at the bottom. So this training account, it only has one route on there, so that's why you only see the one. So what we want to do is we just want to create a new route. So we just click on the Add New button up the top. And when we do that, it'll take us through to the new route system. So this is where we start creating our route. So we have our route info at the top of the page and the map at the bottom. With the map at the bottom, you can move the map around by clicking and dragging, and you can zoom in and out using the mouse wheel. So what we want to do is we want to start by just adding our route name in. And I recommend calling this something that's easily identified later. So don't just call it, Baker's Road or something like that. You want to say, Baker's Road to Power Street, or something along those lines. Or if you have a route assessment ID, you could use that as the name. You can essentially use whatever you want, but I would recommend making it something that you're able to easily identify later. So then we're going to start setting up our route. So what we do is we just simply right click on the map and then just select one of the from here or to here options. And that'll essentially pick the start and finish points for our route. So I'll just click through. So once we have the start and finish points set up, the route will appear on our map as shown. It's possible to change the routing of the map simply by clicking on any section of the route and just moving it over. So you just click and drag the route to where you actually need it to sit. So if you want to avoid a certain street, you can kind of route around it. So once we've sorted out the routing of the journey, we can just click the next button up here. And once we've clicked it, it'll basically finish the route creation, and then we can come back to this route at any point and continue working on it. So once we've created our route, it'll take us to this route elements page. And this is basically, the tool automatically assigns route elements to identify any points of to identify any points of assessment, such as roads, intersections, bridges, or rail crossings. So you can already kind of see that on the map where it has the icons showing up. So essentially, this page is used to confirm all the elements of the route, and if necessary, add additional route elements that weren't pre-populated already. So we're just going to move down that page so that we can see this map correctly. So we're now ready to basically start confirming those route elements. So to confirm the route element, we simply need to right click on each of the route lines or route element icons along the length of the route. It's easiest just to start at the beginning and work your way through to the end. So when you right click, it basically just brings up a little menu, and you want to hit select element details. And that'll take you through to this little pop-up window here. So essentially, you don't necessarily need to fill in all of the details here. So the main ones you really need are just the name and the zone. So the zone essentially determines if the route element is in an urban or rural setting, which will change parts of the assessment later. Things like the custom ID and the description, that's more of a way to track that element in your own system. So if you have an asset management system that has custom IDs for each road or each intersection, you can use those so that you can track them easier. So once we've finished confirming all the route elements, essentially everything will be turning blue as you go through. And once everything is colored blue, that basically means that you've confirmed all of those route elements. So the last step in that is basically just adding any additional elements that weren't pre-populated already. So RAV RAT will try its hardest to pre-populate as much detail as possible. However, it does sometimes miss things like bridges or rail crossings, mainly because they're not already sitting in the Here Maps database. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to add an additional route element, and I'm going to choose a bridge in this instance, as there's a bridge going over a railway track. So simply we just right click on that section of the road and go add, and then we're just going to select which route element we want. So we selected a bridge, so now it's populated that little icon on there, and it's asking us for some element details about that bridge. So this is the time where you do actually need to put in what the length of your bridge is, and I would recommend changing the name. So instead of just being bridge, you could say it's bridge over such and such street, or whatever the actual name of the bridge is. And again, you just need to click OK, and that'll confirm that element. So now, once we have finalized and confirmed all the route elements, we can simply just click the Close Route Editor button, and this will take us through to our route overview screen, which you'll see shortly. So I'll just stop there for a second and just answer any questions that have come up about that.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got a few questions about access, so I may as well ask those. So just is the tool available for use by private consultants? And then how about access for rail authorities for rail over rail bridges? And then a similar one is there consideration in the future to implement RAV RAT for state-controlled roads?
Yep. So, okay, I'll just start at the beginning. So private consultants, right now we don't have plans to, well, I shouldn't say that. Right now we're not giving access to private consultants unless they're doing work on behalf of a local government. It may change in the future, but right now that's how we've set it up. And the main reason why we've done this is simply because NHVI is funding this specifically for local government. So it could change in the future, but that's something we'll have to discuss further. If you do want any information about that, feel free to contact me. I think I've got my email at the end of the presentation. I can't remember now. Rosie, what was the second section of that question? Sorry.
How about access for rail authorities for road over rail bridges on routes?
Yep, so we're perfectly willing to give access to pretty much anyone that owns a road or owns part of the public road network. So there are a lot of forestry, I suppose, forestry agencies in places like Tasmania that have access to RAV RAT, as they control a lot of roads within their kind of private domain, I would say. So we are able to give access to that. It may require us to make a new organization for you in the system, so it could take a couple of days, but more than happy to do that. And the third question was, sorry?
About consideration in the future for implementing RAV RAT for state-controlled roads.
Yeah, so yeah, there's no issue with actually using this already for state-controlled roads. It does the same assessment as it would for a local government road. It provides you like the same responses and everything like that. So yeah, there's no reason why you can't use it for state-controlled roads already. I think we may already have some people from, I think, TMR and maybe Vic Roads that have used it. Yeah.
Awesome. And we've just got two questions. We've got lots of questions, but two about how RAV RAT works. So how was the pavement assessment done?
So with the pavement assessment, I suppose RAV RAT doesn't accommodate for pavement assessment. That's something that you do have to do externally to RAV RAT. There is discussion on including a pavement module into RAV RAT, but right now we don't have any plans for it. The tool is mainly used for geometric assessment rather than pavement assessment. So yeah, there are a few things that you would have to do external to the tool, unfortunately.
And can RAV RAT assist swept path analysis?
So currently it doesn't have that capability. There is a section where you can provide the results of a swept path assessment into the tool to basically determine access, but you can't do it straight through RAV RAT currently. Again, we're actually looking into this further to essentially implement a way to do that in RAV RAT, but that'll be, yeah, some time off, which I can't really give you a good date on that right now, unfortunately.
Okay, great. And we've just got one question and then we'll move on.
Yep.
Phil says that he thought the HERE data did contain all the bridges and level crossings.
Yep. To be honest, I don't have enough background in that to answer that right now. It could be that we are able to import that data into RAV RAT. However, that's not really my specialty. So yeah, unfortunately, I can't give you much more info on that. I'll get Rosie to get your contact details, and I can always talk to you further about that afterwards.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you. Let's move on. We've got lots of questions and keep them coming. Thank you.
Yep. No worries. All right. So this is essentially the overview page that I mentioned previously. So now that we have our route, I can go through and show you a brief overview of how to use the PBS Expert module. So as I said previously, this module can be used to assess for any typical restricted access vehicle, not just PBS vehicles. So you can use it to assess for road trains or B doubles, and it basically just provides you that PBS network classification, and then you can assign that to typical vehicles based on the table that I mentioned earlier. And we'll go through that a little bit later as well. So first of all, we just want to basically just click on the PBS Expert button. That'll take you through to that PBS module. So this is the overview page for the PBS Expert. So as you can see right now, it's a little bit blank. But essentially, over on the left, it shows you all the characteristics of assessment that RAV RAT goes through. So you got like lane width, stopping distance, signal timing, et cetera, et cetera. Here you've got your route elements. So this is drawn from that route creation that we did previously. So every element that was shown in the route creation stage shows up here. And these are basically all the parts of that route that you need to assess. This section here shows you all your PBS classifications. So obviously right now it's looking a bit empty because we haven't started doing our assessment. Once we start assessing a few characteristics, then it'll start populating with that data, and you can start seeing what level of access this route has. And we'll come back to this towards the end of the webinar, so I can kind of show you how that's displayed and how to interpret that. So for now, we're just going to start looking at the lane width characteristic for one of the roads. So we click on the lane width section, and it'll bring us through to this page here. So this is one of our assessment pages where we can assess each characteristic of the route. These pages also provide a broad overview of the characteristic at the top here. So if you're not sure what you're looking at, that kind of gives you a little bit more information. Down in the bottom right, it also shows you a little bit more in-depth information about how you would actually do this exercise. So during the question and answer, if you come across anything that you're not too sure about, usually that item help section will provide a little bit more information and help you out. So you can scroll down the page when you're doing your route assessment, and it'll have a whole bunch more information there. So hopefully that can, sort out any issues. Otherwise, there's always the help and support section if you need to contact us. Back over here, we have that route element section again. So essentially, RAV RAT will default the route element selection to the earliest element in the route. So that's obviously shown there in blue, and all the grayed out ones are ones that you're able to assess later. So you can select different elements simply by just clicking on the element tree, and that'll swap what element you're assessing. So right now, we're looking at South Audley Street. If we were to click on Victoria Street, then we'd be looking at Victoria Street. And finally, we just have basically the question and answer section of the route element. So this is the section that you really want to focus on, I guess, because this is where you start inputting that data and where RAV RAT starts, determining what classification this road should be given. So I'm just going to demonstrate on the lane width section on how to basically go through and do a little bit of an assessment on this. So, oops. Can I go back? Sorry about that. So essentially, this is basically just asking us, does lane width for this road section need to be included in the route classification? The only time it really wouldn't need to be included is if you have assessed this previously in the past and you know for sure that it's going to meet whatever criteria you need. So if you've already assessed it some other time for a road train and you're now looking at access for like a B double or something like that, there's not really any point reassessing it. So you can just click no, and it basically just provides it with the highest level of classification. In our instance, we're going to go through and we're going to do the assessment. So we're going to say, yes, this needs to be assessed. And again, you'll see that it's just asking you very simple questions. So it's basically saying, what road type is it? So in this instance, we're saying that it's a 2-lane undivided road with no marked lanes. And then we just hit that next button again. So again, our speed zone is less than 60 kilometers an hour. And we don't have any bends of concern on that road. And so now we've reached a question where it's directly asking us for a measured value. So on this road, we're saying that the minimum road width is between 3 meters and 3.2 meters. And it essentially has a drop-down box at the bottom here, which asks you how you ascertained the answer to the question above. So it kind of gives you a couple of different options. So you've got measured value, expert judgment, and estimate. So you don't necessarily need to go out on the road and actually measure this, but it is highly encouraged because this does affect your reliability index. So up in the top right, we can see our current route classification and also our route reliability. So if we were to go through and estimate every single measurement for the route, our reliability would be incredibly low, and we wouldn't really want to trust the judgment that's come from this. So once we've finished that assessment, so RAV RAT will basically compare what we've said against the guidelines to work out what the highest level of PBS classification is for that route element. So as we can see here, RAV RAT has basically determined that from our inputs, the appropriate level is PBS level 2B. This can then be used to determine which vehicles can access the route as shown in that table that I showed earlier. So let's bring that up. So for instance, we have the road that's being classified as 2B. So we can see from the table that it's suitable for 26 meter B doubles and PBS vehicles up to 30 meters in length, or the maximum length for the PBS 2B limit. So I'll just pause there again and just, if anyone wants to ask any questions about that, now's the chance.
Thank you. We've got lots of quite different questions and I can't even group them. So I'll just start with what we've got.
Okay.
So Shirlene, thank you. Are there any plans to be able to include non-geometric factors such as schools, shopping centres, etc.?
Yep, so great question. In a couple of minutes, I'll actually get to that and I'll show you how to input those kind of answers into RAV RAT. Because obviously, things like shopping centres, hospitals, school areas, school bus routes, they're not necessarily a geometric issue, but it's definitely something that can affect the level of access for heavy vehicles. So I will actually discuss that a bit later in the webinar.
And Paolo asks, will this route assessment potentially trigger road improvements?
Yes. So one of the functions that I'm not going to discuss it today, but hopefully, when we do a few more of these webinars, we'll be able to discuss it then. But one of the functions is to actually identify what we call pinch points in your network. So you'll be able to get a report from RAV RAT, which shows you essentially where the most restrictive PBS classifications are on your network, and then you can essentially trigger maintenance or route upgrades from that.
Awesome. And can you download case routes from the NHVR portal? And does RAV RAT consider each state road authority supplement guides to the NHVR route assessment guide?
If I'm understanding correctly, you're asking if you can download the route that's given in the NHVR portal to RAV RAT. If that's correct, currently we don't have that functionality. However, at the very start of the webinar, I did mention that integration into the NHVR portal, and it's definitely something that we're looking into, so that instead of having to transition from the portal into RAV RAT, you'll be able to use RAV RAT within the portal, and you can hopefully then just kind of import that route automatically into RAV RAT and then assess from there. So you don't really have to go through that that route creation process. And
awesome.
I've just forgotten what that second part of the question was, unfortunately.
Does RAV RAT consider each state road authority supplement guides? Yeah.
No. So right now, RAV RAT is solely based on the performance-based standards route assessment classification. So it doesn't really take into account the supplementary data that other states would have. So I know obviously TMR's got their own multi-combination route assessment guidelines, and in some instances, a lot of that data is very similar or the same. But when there are differences, it doesn't take that into account, no. So if you are using those supplementary data sets or guidelines, you may have to do that externally. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's move on. We've still got lots of questions and we'll get to them at the end. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So now we're going to look at one of the assessment characteristics that uses a slightly different assessment format to what we just looked at with the lane width assessment. So we're going to look at the bridges and overpasses section, and I know a lot of people get really excited because they'll have some way to assess their bridges, and unfortunately right now this doesn't necessarily allow you to assess a bridge within RAV RAT. It's more, it takes an assessment that's already done and just puts it into RAV RAT, so you have some way of tracking that, just to curb that level of hype, unfortunately. So when we get into this bridges and overpasses section, you won't be able to see the bridge initially. What you'll have to do is you'll just have to click on the little drop-down arrow next to the road that bridge is located on, and then you'll be able to see that bridge underneath. So once you've done that, then it'll come through to the actual question and answer section. One of the things I mentioned earlier was RAV RAT was able to reuse elements from other routes in order to speed up the assessment of new routes. So this bridge is actually shared. This bridge is actually a shared element, which means it has already been created on another route. So any changes that you would make on this route would then reflect on any other route. In this instance, it doesn't look like we've done the assessment for the bridge. However, it is contained on another route. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go through and do this assessment section now. So for this bridge, we're basically going to say that the bridge has been inspected. If we say no at this stage, it'll basically just give the most restrictive level of access on that bridge, which is PDS level 1. So it basically just says that it's fine for general access, but anything else and it's not suitable. So what we're going to do is we're going to say yes to that. Then it's basically going to ask, has an inspection been undertaken by a qualified engineer? So if we say no to this one, it just reflects really poorly on the route reliability. In this instance, we're going to say yes again. And then it'll essentially just ask you details about that inspection. So you can fill it in with whatever information you want. However, I would recommend filling it in with basically the inspection number, inspection date, who it was inspected by, and what their qualifications were. Yeah. And that's more for record keeping purposes. So later on, when someone asks you about it, you have that data available, and you can say to people, look, this was inspected at this time, and this is our result that we got. So once we hit next on that one, it will essentially just ask us what level was granted for that based on that bridge inspection. So what is the highest level allowed to utilize the bridge? So we're saying that it was PBS level 2A. Now, this may not be actually correct, so nobody take that. So how do we ascertain the answer to the question above? So we did a qualified assessment. And when we click through, again, it shows us what our classification level is for this route. So it's basically saying, yep, bridges are classified as level 2A, which is pretty standard, suitable for a B double. So I'll just do a quick question section there. I know we're running out of time a little bit, and I've only got a small section left after this.
Awesome. So yeah, we've got lots of questions, which is great. Is is a road shoulder captured, sealed versus unsealed shoulder?
Yes, I believe so. I might have to double check. I know it definitely captures the shoulder width, and I'm fairly certain that it captures it on both sealed and unsealed.
Is there a way of entering a council's road hierarchy class for each road into RAV RAT and use this to identify preferred routes for RAV?
Currently, no. So unfortunately, we don't have that sort of functionality at present time. The default routing that happens during a new route creation is based on HereMaps data. So HereMaps provides obviously navigation data, I believe, to TomTom, which also includes heavy vehicle navigation data. So it draws from that. So hopefully, when you actually create your route, it'll be the right way to start with. But unfortunately, there's no way to actually add your own hierarchy in there to change that routing methodology. You can always change the actual route that the journey would take during the route creation phase. So.
Fantastic. All right, let's move on, and we've still got a few for the end.
Cool. So the last section is fairly quick, and it's very similar to what we just did for the bridges. So this is basically, I know we had a question before about those non-geometric assessments. So RAV RAT also contains the ability to restrict access based on issues that may not be engineering related or geometric related, such as school zones or proximity to hospitals, or issues that may not be able to be handled by RAV RAT in that kind of quantitative way. So this can be done through the other characteristics section. So you can see that on the left menu bar there. So when we go through to that, it takes us to another one of these question and answer sections. So essentially you just need to pick which route element that this other criteria applies to. So for this one, we're just going to stay at the start point, and we just want to say, yes, there are other factors that we would like to consider. And then it'll basically just ask you what the other relevant items are. So for this one, we're just going to say that there's a school located in this segment of the road, and it could be a safety risk. So once we get through to the next section, this will then again ask you what PBS classification you want to give that. So for instance, if there is already B doubles operating on that section of road, but you don't want to give access to, say, a B triple or a road train because you have concerns that it could affect safety around that school area, perfectly reasonable. So we just restrict that level of access down to 2A. And then we just hit next again. And again, it just goes through to this, this output kind of section, which just shows what the classification is for that other route element section. Now, so if we want to see what the actual levels of access for our route are, we can go back to the main PBS Expert page. So this page here. So now we can see that there's actually a little bit of data in there. We can see what the PBS classification is for each of those criteria. So for example, we can see that some of the characteristics meet level 4B access. So on stopping distances and signal timing, it meets 4B classification. But on other sections such as the bridges and overpasses and the swept path, it's only meeting level 2A. So what that essentially means is that for the total route, it will only give the lowest overall classification. So even though that we have some route elements which can accommodate 4B access, because the vehicle obviously needs to travel the entire length of this route, there's no point worrying about whether they have 4B access because certain sections are only 2A approved, I guess you could say. So this will actually restrict it down to the lowest level of access, or the most restrictive level of access, which in this case is PBS level 2A. So that essentially just brings us to the end of the training webinar that I've got here. So hopefully the outcomes of this webinar is you should now have a broad, maybe a bit brief understanding of how to access RAV RAT, where to find the help and training sections, how to create a new route and import all your route elements and confirm those elements, how to use the PBS Expert, and also how to view the outcomes from that assessment. Now, I know we don't really have a chance to go over every single element of the RAV RAT tool, and I know that there's a few of those modules that we didn't get a chance to discuss in this webinar. So I'm hoping that we can do that in subsequent webinars that we hold in the future, and give you a very good overview of how to use the entire tool. In the meantime, like I said, there is that training user manual, and there is also the videos on the website that you're able to use, and hopefully that'll be able to give you a really good understanding of how to use the tool. So I'll just open us back up for questions for the remainder of the time.
Thank you. And I think, Kieran, you designed the survey, so that's asking our audience more about what training they would want. So if people could just stay on the line and fill that out, that would be great. And also the GoToWebinar will give us a Q&A report. So Kieran, you'll be able to look at the questions asked, and any that weren't answered we can address individually. So that's great. We've got from Andrew, sorry, Kieran.
Yep.
All good. From Andrew, if a road with different width characteristics along its length is it important to split it up in the initial phase into smaller subsections so that the differences can be reflected?
Yeah, so I guess that's a bit of a tricky one. In some instances, you may have to split it. So if you have multiple routes that I guess are starting at different sections on that road, then you may be benefited by splitting that up. For example, say the first 100 meters of the road is 3 meters wide, but then the last 500 meters is 6 meters wide. If you have a route starting in the first 100 meters, it's completely different to starting it in the last 500 meters. So that would be a time where it might be beneficial to split that, and you can do that just by adding in an extra intersection along that route. In the instance where in every route they're traveling the whole length of that road, then it's better to just use the most restrictive width on that route, so the 3 meters rather than the 6 meters.
And will the assessment consider vehicle weight, so HML versus GML?
No, so right now, RAV RAT is mainly geometric, and it doesn't consider the actual mass of the vehicle, and that kind of leads back to that pavement assessment that we were talking about earlier. It is something that we could look at putting into the tool in the future if a lot of people are wanting this. It's just a matter of what the demand for it is and how we can implement that, I suppose. But at the current time, it's not something that's considered in there.
Can you attach an inspection report or files? So I'll just read that again. Sometimes people are typing quickly, so it's hard to work out what they mean. But can you attach inspection report or files, the bridge elements?
Right now, no. You can't attach an actual bridge inspection to RAV RAT at the current time. I don't know if we've really had too many people in the past request that, so I don't know if it's something that we've thought about in the past. However, if we have a few people that want that, then it may be something that we can, definitely put in the future. But right now, I don't believe so. And I just want to backtrack real quickly to that question about the HML, GML. There is a possibility, there is a way to restrict a route based on mass in RAV RAT currently. It's under the local consideration section. It was mainly for if there is a road that has like an actual weight limit on there, so a 10-ton limit or something like that for the length of a road. You could use that to restrict based on GML, HML if you want, but it's not doing an actual assessment on whether it's suitable.
Okay, and Gary has asked if we know the video will be available. Are we sending around the slides or just the video, Kieran?
I can send the slides around if that's something that people want. Yeah.
Okay, and Cameron's asking how much does it cost?
So if you are a local government that is in a state that is kind of participating in the heavy vehicle national law, it is free to use. If you're in WA or NT, then it may have a charge applied to you. Right now, we don't really have anyone that's using it in those states. I believe that they have their own kind of assessment methodology that they use. And as I said earlier, we haven't opened it up to industry operators yet, so actual freight operators. It is something that we may look into in the future. There is a potential for a trial to work out the benefit. However, it isn't something that we're really pursuing right now. And in the case of private consultants, we're not providing access currently. However, if it is a engineering consultant doing work on behalf of a local council, then you can already get access just by asking the local council for one of their accounts, or we are looking at a process where local councils can nominate an engineering consultancy to do work for them for a set period of time.
Okay, and thank you, Kieran. We'll leave our questions. Please stay on the line and fill out the survey to help us work out how to deliver our next webinars. And please write to Kieran or me if you've got any questions. Otherwise, Kieran will respond to you. Any final key points, Kieran?
No, I think that's it. Unfortunately, I did actually forget to put a slide in here with my email address, but it is essentially just kieran.hay at arrb.com.au. In the slides that we send out, I'll add a slide that has my contact details if anyone wants to get in contact about the tool.
Perfect. That's just such a great session. Thank you so much, Kieran, and thank you to our wonderful audience. We'll finish up now.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone.